Yes, they only use them when they're required to.
Right.
When people are watching. But otherwise, it's downtown Beijing.
Yeah. Louise Wickham, thank you, from Emission Impossible, joining us on the panel. Now, speaking of things that may not be good for you, has Australia become too zealous in its anti-smoking initiatives? There's been a bit of chat about this in recent times. The BBC's reporting on this now. Smoking, they're trying to make a packet of cigarettes cost $40 for a start. They're moving towards that. Smoking prohibited within 10 metres of a playground, within 4 metres of the entrance to a public building, rail platforms, taxi ranks, bus stops, banned on beaches, banned as here in jail. You can be fined $2,000 if you smoke in the wrong place. And Professor Simon Dennis of the Australian National University says smokers feel marginalised because they cannot be citizens in public places anymore because they're restricted to dirty spaces, and it adds a burden of shame to people already marginalised. And we know that the poor smoke, we know that mentally unwell people smoke, we know shopkeepers are being bashed for their cigarettes. Should we rein in the anti-smoking urge a bit, gentlemen?
They should just have smoking cruise ships, where you just get your cigarettes, buy them cheaply on the open waters, smoke on the promenade deck while jogging.
They run the ship on tobacco, and you can just sit there and inhale it.
Yeah, unfiltered.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a health issue, isn't it? Smoking is a health issue, and there's some people who smoke and they apparently do it by choice, and they don't regret it, and they tell you how much they love it. Yeah. But there's a very large portion of smokers who say, look, I know that it's bad for me, but I am a smoker, and you need to. So yeah, I kind of agree that we don't want to demonise these people who have a problem, but on the other hand, you want to give them every incentive possible and make it as hard as possible to take up, and give them every reason to give it up.
Okay.
I thought by now there'd be some sort of competition from marijuana. I thought the tobacco companies were the lobby keeping marijuana out of the market, if you like. And if all these tobacco laws are happening, why isn't there some movement towards being able to buy sort of 20 marijuana cigarettes the way people buy cigarettes?
Okay, I was going to say to Duncan, who may want to comment on that, Rabin. But there is also, Duncan, the right to smoke. There is an adult's right to choose his or her own poison, and that's what I think this professor is hinting at.
Yeah, and I
it?
suppose, putting my kind of academic hat on, you'd say, look, the amount of tax which is on cigarettes is it's punitive. It's not it's disproportionate to the harm that's being caused. The only reason it's there is because there's this moral health decision that smoking is an evil thing, and we therefore should effectively, through tax, punish people who smoke. And the flip side is, well, hang on, that's not right. That's an illegitimate tax. You can tax me to raise revenue fairly across the population, and you can levy actual costs that things, that activities cause. But that is a lot of tax for a packet of cigarettes.
Very good. I hope both of you have a lovely Waitangi weekend. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Duncan, always a pleasure. And Rabin, you too.
Cheers, Jim.
Enjoy your gigs over the weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for your company, everybody. Good luck if you're travelling, especially, as we said, north of Wellington. Very slow still. And we're back with the panel on Tuesday. Checkpoints with John Campbell is coming right up.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint. In fact, we're on after the news at 5, but tonight we're going to reveal for the first time police plans for New Zealanders to report more crimes online. The Prime Minister floats the idea of taking Waitangi commemorations on the road. The White House tells us everything is fine with Australia. What did happen and how are they sorting it out? New Zealand Cricket launches an investigation into the future of Napier's McLean Park as an international venue, and the people of Napier say we want it to stay one. A rescue operation for eels in Cheviot, a new super school opens in Christchurch, and eating locusts. All that, and we are going to keep an eye on that terrible traffic situation heading north from Wellington. Coming up.
RNZ News at 5. No, my Heidi, my good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. The Prime Minister says iwi around the country would fall over themselves to have the chance to host National Waitangi Day celebrations, and that option is worth investigating. Bill English made the comment after attending his one and only formal event at Waitangi itself this weekend, meeting with the Iwi Chairs Forum. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Come Waitangi Day on Monday, Mr English will be hosted in Auckland by Ngāti Whātua. He says there could be merit in taking Waitangi celebrations on the road, which he says is a suggestion raised frequently by iwi and the broader public. When asked about whether Waitangi Day should be celebrated elsewhere, iwi leaders at the forum said as a place Waitangi has very special significance, as does the mana of having the Prime Minister there on the day. Meanwhile, Mr English is keeping well clear of a debate over Te Tii Marae, asking some media organisations for up to $10,000 for filming rights, suggesting the two parties should duke it out between themselves. At Waitangi, Jane Patterson.
Mr English says he's not worried about his upcoming phone call with the United States President. Donald Trump is reported to have harangued Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull during a phone call at the weekend. Mr Trump is quoted as calling a refugee swap between the two countries as the worst ever and accusing Australia of wanting to export the next Boston bombers to the US. Despite this, Mr English says he's looking forward to talking to Mr Trump.
No, I'm not nervous about it. I mean, it's we'd expect to maintain the very good relationship we have with the US. Talking to their president has always been part of that. There's a long history of differences of view between the US and New Zealand, going right back to Vietnam. So I don't see why that should make much difference to the phone call.
Bill English says he doesn't know when exactly he'll talk to the US president. Some victims of crime are unimpressed by the government's pledge to invest $500 million in the police and to recruit 880 more frontline officers. They say unless something is done about the country's drug problems and police attitudes to property crimes, little will change. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
Taupo burglary victim Gary says he was unimpressed with the police response. He says they didn't want to know about the incident until they were told firearms were involved, and his wife eventually found the family's stolen car herself. Gary says unless police up their game, throwing more resources at crime will not have the desired effect. Waitara man Ian was caught up in a drug-fuelled home invasion. He says the police are the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and the country's pea epidemic needs to be tackled head-on. Under the policy announced by Prime Minister Bill English this week, the number of sworn officers will rise to nearly 9,800 by June 2021. Ko Robin Martin Tene.
The British drug company Reckitt Beckinsale has been fined a record $1.08 million in the Auckland District Court for making misleading claims about its pharmaceuticals. The company faced 10 charges relating to its Nurofen painkiller products. The Commerce Commission Chairman, Mark Berry, brought the prosecution, saying people paid a premium $7 a packet, believing products were tailored to pain in a particular part of the body, when in fact they all worked the same.
We regard this as a very serious matter, and that is reflected in the fact that this is the highest ever single penalty under the Fair Trading Act that has been achieved. Product descriptions must be true and accurate. We regard these kind of matters as particularly acute for pharmaceuticals.
Dr. Mark Berry. Nurofen's manufacturers say they cooperated fully with the Commerce Commission and have changed their packaging. Northland is officially in drought. The Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, told Mid-North farmers this afternoon that after months without significant rain, the region has been declared to be in a medium-scale adverse drought event. Mr. Guy says that triggers help to get farmers through the season.
What that does mean is that we will support the Rural Support Trust more so than we do normally. It will also mean that there's rural assistance payments available for farmers, particularly those that could be in hardship. There will be some taxation flexibility from IRD as well.
Nathan Guy there. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The New Zealand netball coach Janine Salby says Tapaya Selby-Rickett was instrumental in this morning's 61-37 win over England in their Quad Series clash in Liverpool. Salby says Selby-Rickett slotted in well at goal shoot when Bailey Mess had to go off before halftime.
She has been playing most of her recent netball at goal attack, so the fact that she can get back into goal shoot just, is a real bonus for us in the Ferns, and I think, credit to her, she came on really strongly and she shot really well and was available and it was easy to read.
Janine Southby. The Silver Ferns meet South Africa on Sunday morning in their final game of the Quad Series. The New Zealand women's sevens team have beaten Papua New Guinea 34-5 in their opening pool game at the Sydney leg of the Sevens World Series. New Zealand's next game is against France just after 7 o'clock. Meanwhile, the Tasman duo of Trail Joas and Andrew Newstub will debut for the New Zealand men's sevens team as they attempt to defend their title in Sydney. Captain Scott Curry says the uncapped players are ready to make their mark when the tournament starts tomorrow.
A couple of new guys come in this weekend with Trail and Stubby, so it's pretty exciting to see them. Stubby was player of the tournament in our national tournament back in Rotorua, so excited to see how he goes. And Trail is looking really good at training, so it'll be good to see how they go.
Scott Curry. And the Kangaroos rugby league star Jonathan Thurston, who's taking part in this weekend's Auckland Nines, has called on the NRL to move the event to Australia. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a musical mixtape from the singer-songwriter Aldous Harding. Country Life visits the Central Otago growers Otto and Valda Muller, trying to crack into the organic walnut market. And because we're heading into a long weekend made possible by a treaty signed 177 years ago, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to deals, arrangements, agreements. On Nights, don't forget to check the fine print with me, Brian Crump, from Afternoon News at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service. It takes us through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Patchy drizzle, clearing Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula this afternoon or evening. And then in Northland overnight, it should be mainly fine tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, fine apart from isolated showers this afternoon and evening. For Waikato through to Wellington, and that includes the Central High Country, also Hawke's Bay and Waitangi. Fine for the rest of today, cloud increases tomorrow. A few showers developing about Tararua range from the afternoon tomorrow. It will be fine for Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury today and tomorrow. Buller and Northwestland, fine spells. Showers develop late this afternoon or evening, clearing tomorrow evening. Southern Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, easing to showers tomorrow morning, then clearing in Westland later. Otago, excluding Clutha, fine intervals, isolated showers this afternoon or evening. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods, isolated showers around coastal areas, and long, fine intervals for the Chatham Islands. It's nearly 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks very much, Paul. A very good evening to you, everyone. Just a reminder, we are broadcasting live on Facebook. Lots of people on Facebook tonight commenting on Paul's super groovy hair. We begin tonight at Waitangi, which Bill English today visited for the first time as Prime Minister. He was there for the iwi Chairs Forum. He will not be there on Waitangi Day or at Te Timarai the day before it. Instead, the Prime Minister will be a guest of Ngāti Whātua in Auckland. Next year, where? Because Bill English has floated the idea of taking Waitangi commemorations, quote, on the road. In Waitangi today, he met with about 150 iwi leaders for what he described as open and gritty discussions. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, was also there.
A calm and orderly reception for Bill English and a large ministerial delegation at the Iwi Chairs Forum in Waitangi this morning, with just one lone protester outside. The Prime Minister says they covered a number of topics, some of them difficult, including a shift away from the whānau first approach to the placement of children under new child, youth and family legislation. However, one of the iwi leaders at the forum, the chairman of Waikato Tainui, Rahui Papa, says the principle of whānau first is very important to iwi.
We think that whānau, hapu and iwi are best placed to look after children that have been removed into the state's hands, and we think that if they've given the opportunity to be in their own context with their own heritage and legacy, then that helps the child and it helps alleviate some of the pressures.
Mr English says the government is open to changes to the legislation, but cautioned they wouldn't be anything dramatic.
Part of the discussion is about everyone understanding what's already in the legislation, which the government believes is in pretty good shape. There's some other views that it needs to go further, or this clause or that clause needs to be changed, and we're open to having that discussion because it is so important.
Mr English will not attend the pōwhiri for the Crown at Te Tii Marae on Sunday, as he would not have been able to speak on the marae, and he'll be hosted by Ngāti Whātua in Auckland on Waitangi Day itself. He says while he hasn't had any specific invitations, if he is still Prime Minister next year, he would be open to celebrating Waitangi Day in other parts of the country.
That's been the most common suggestion I've heard from the public and from iwi. So I think it's worth investigating, because the treaty was signed in quite a number of places, and I suppose the benefit of it would be that New Zealanders who don't live in the far north see a bit more of the relevance to their local area.
However, Harry Burkhart, chairperson of the Ngāti Kuri Trust Board and host of the Iwi Forum, says Waitangi as a location does have special significance.
So in terms of Waitangi, this is very special. The place of Waitangi is very special. So the ability for us to honour that legacy is relatively critical for us.
As Te Tii Marae prepares to welcome opposition party leaders and MPs on Sunday, it's emerged some media have been asked to pay up to $10,000 for rights to film on the marae. Mr English is staying well clear of that particular debate.
If it's an argument between the media and Te Tii Marae, I'd have to say they are well fitted to have an argument, those two parties, and they should just head off and have it.
From Waitangi for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
We would love your feedback on this. How would you feel about Waitangi commemorations moving around the country in terms of the formal ones that the Prime Minister attends? Anyway, you can text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And thank you for all your feedback last night. It was a very busy night indeed. We're going now to Washington, tentatively, because who knows what kind of reception is awaiting. Just ask Malcolm Turnbull. But today, after that phone call, already legendary in the annals of the bilateral chat, there have been intense diplomatic efforts to try to persuade people that, one, the men got along famously, and two, if they didn't, it doesn't matter because the relationship between Australia and the US is otherwise sound. Australia's ambassador to the US, Joe Hockey, has met President Trump's chief of staff and his key advisor, that's Steve Bannon, of course, in what was described as a productive session. At the very least, no one hung up on anyone. Both sides are trying to limit the fallout of yesterday's phone call, but as CNN's Sarah Murray reports, it's raised big questions about Mr. Trump's approach to international diplomacy.
President Trump irking allies on the Hill and abroad with his on-the-fly diplomacy after a contentious call with the Australian Prime Minister. While Trump tossed out some quick praise for America's Aussie ally today.
I have a lot of respect for Australia. I love Australia as a country.
Sources tell CNN the president's Saturday evening call with Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was tense. Trump took issue with an Obama administration deal to accept 1,250 refugees from an Australian detention center. A move that collides with Trump's decision to suspend the refugee program for 120 days and suspend the Syrian refugee program indefinitely.
I said, why? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose?
Today, Trump is still fuming over the agreement, even after administration officials made clear the U.S. would honor it. As for the Australian Prime Minister, he insists his call with Trump ended courteously, even if it had an edge to it.
As far as the nature of the discussion, it was very frank and forthright. I stand up for Australia's interests. I make Australia's case as powerfully and persuasively as I can, wherever I am.
Trump's unorthodox approach to diplomacy is unnerving U.S. allies, career civil servants, and even GOP leaders who quickly defended the long-standing allegiance between the U.S. and Australia.
This, in my view, was an unnecessary and frankly harmful open dispute over an issue which is not nearly important as United States-Australian cooperation.
It's just the latest indication of Trump's gruff style. Sources say in a call with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, he also fired off a warning about Mexico's tough hombres and offered U.S. assistance with the drug cartels. The brash businessman turned head of state appears to have little appetite for changing course.
Believe me, when you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. They're tough. We have to be tough.
Advisors say it's fitting with the worldview Trump laid out in his inaugural address, promising to rewrite the world order and reevaluate America's relationship with enemies and allies alike.
That's CNN's Sarah Murray from Washington. A bizarre story coming out of Canberra. It's been broken, for what it's worth, by 2GB, who actually Malcolm Turnbull spoke to yesterday, that a staffer in the Australian PM's office has just been suspended over inappropriate Facebook posts about Donald Trump. I'd read them out, but I'm not sure I'd pronounce them correctly. Anyway, a staffer in PM Turnbull's office has put his or her foot in it and has been suspended. Back here in New Zealand, the Prime Minister, Bill English, told reporters he's not worried about his upcoming phone call with Mr Trump. Indeed, he says he's looking forward to it.
No reason to believe it won't be a civil and maybe direct conversation.
But are you not nervous at all, given he's given a shakedown basically to Malcolm Turnbull?
No, I'm not nervous about it. I mean, it's we'd expect to maintain the very good relationship we have with the US. Talking to their president has always been part of that. There's a long history of differences of view between the US and New Zealand, going right back to Vietnam. So I don't see why that should make much difference to the phone call.
Will you be expressing concerns to him about issues like the border changes that they've made? Will you be raising areas of disagreement?
Oh yeah, I'll raise areas where we don't agree, particularly the recent issues. But I think anyone can see that's part of a bigger picture where the relationship matters to New Zealand. I think it matters to the US.
But we're dealing with a completely changed game with a president who's willing to go on Twitter and tweet about stuff that he doesn't like, that he talked in a conversation with another leader with.
Well, look, I don't think that should change our approach. New Zealand has we have a way of doing things, which is to communicate with those who are our friends and allies on a pretty open basis.
As Bill English speaking earlier today at Waitangi. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced more than $500 million extra to be spent on crime fighting. The police promising to add 1,100 extra police officers over the next 4 years, including 880 frontline officers. Tonight we can reveal another tool the government wants to implement: reporting crime from home. No, not dialing 111. Checkpoint has learned the police are considering rolling out online reporting for non-emergencies. They want to do so in time for the election. Zach Fleming explains.
Come September, you could be able to report a crime without even visiting a station or speaking to an officer. Non-urgent road incidents, scams, privacy breaches, online harassment and anonymous tip-offs can already be done online, but now Assistant Police Commissioner Alan Boreham says police are looking at whether to widen that out.
We're having a look at what might be some first-off reports at the easier end of the scale, where there's more volume and less intensity in the reporting. So reporting suspicious activity in your street, for example, could be a good one.
It would likely then be expanded to include things like theft, willful damage, antisocial behaviour and potentially even minor assaults. Cost is dependent on how broad a service police decide to go for, but if given funding, it would be slowly rolled out over 6 to 12 months.
We believe that there are people that are more comfortable with reporting things online than they would be in person or by telephone, or actually people feel for the seriousness of what they're reporting, it's not worth bothering us, and they might not make that call at all. We want that information, and we think online services would see an increase in that type of information.
Most people we spoke to on the streets of Auckland today liked the idea.
It's a no-brainer, mate. Just do it. The more crooks you catch and how you catch them, that's great.
Yes, it would be really convenient. 24/7 self-service.
I think it's a really good idea, even in terms of domestic violence cases in New Zealand, having a subtle way to get help that's not attracting attention to yourself, or being able to go online and quietly ask for help.
But most also shared a common hesitation.
Well, as long as they get back to you within a reasonable amount of time, I'll be fine with it, yeah.
Online crime reporting is already offered in several countries around the world, including parts of the US, UK and Australia. A system introduced to New South Wales last year receives nearly 1,000 reports every month. Assistant Commissioner Boreham says a New Zealand system would be similar in that serious crimes would still involve frontline staff.
I can't imagine for very serious offences that we wouldn't need to do that in person, originally by telephone when it's a critical incident, and then in person to get the in-depth detail that we need.
Labour's police spokesperson Stuart Nash would welcome it with, again, one caveat.
The one condition that I do have is that the police
treat online crime reporting in the same way that they treat phone calls or people dropping into stations. It's got to be treated with a matter of urgency, and they've got to devote the resources to make sure that it meets the expectation of the people who are using this medium.
Assistant Commissioner Borham says the system is not about saving money or transferring staff.
There will be opportunities in that, but at the same time demand is obviously growing, so this is not about cost cutting. This is about us being able to do the smartest things, get the best information, get in and help our community.
An April business case is likely to have broad parliamentary support. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
21 minutes past 5, or almost that time. Anyway, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us on a Friday night. Coming up on the program, no sympathy from the Immigration Minister for the Indian students facing imminent deportation. And New Zealand Cricket launches an inquiry into whether McLean Park in Napier is fit to host future internationals. Later in the program, we have a rather lovely story and perhaps an antidote to the week out of a town called Victoria in Texas, where the local mosque was burnt down suspiciously. That's not lovely, but the local synagogue said, "Here, have the keys, we'll share the place with you." We talk to them later on Checkpoint. Would love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us 2101, you can tweet us at CheckpointRNZ, and of course you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Already receiving lots of feedback saying Bill English should go to Waitangi. The Immigration Minister says the Indian students who are planning to seek sanctuary in a church to try to avoid being deported are perpetrators of fraud and are not victims. The 9 students, helped by the Unite Union, say it's not fair that they have to leave the country because they were taken in by dodgy immigration agents in India. But the Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says they are squarely responsible for the situation that they are in. Rowan Quinn reports.
Michael Woodhouse says the students' situation will only get worse the longer they stay. He says most of the more than 100 students also caught out by the same immigration investigation last year have left voluntarily. He wouldn't say whether immigration officials would forcibly remove the ones who are still here from a church, saying that would be speculation.
What I would encourage anybody who finds themselves in this situation to do is to leave New Zealand voluntarily. Whatever the circumstances that led them to being in that situation, it can only be made worse by intransigence, fear and hiding.
Mr Woodhouse rejects the students' claims that they're the victims of dishonest immigration agents and that the New Zealand government's not doing enough to weed them out.
They may have taken bad advice, but they are responsible for all of the information that is provided on a visa application. Immigration officers will interview them, check and confirm that they understand that that's the case. And unfortunately, they are in a situation where they provided fraudulent information in their applications, and this is the consequence.
But one of the students, Manoj Nara, said he had no idea that the agents were attaching fraudulent material with his application. He says the agents are financially motivated because they receive a commission from the education institutions, and he says he was never interviewed by Immigration New Zealand.
I did not receive any phone call or emails or anything from me apart from the immigration to me. Immigration did not contact me in my student visa application process. How can I know that there is a fraudulent thing in my application?
Mr Woodhouse says the government's been looking at whether changes are needed to better regulate agents. The Unite Union says it's still working out what church the students will stay at and organising logistics. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The government is looking at the appointment of marriage celebrants after complaints people were being rejected because they refused to marry same-sex couples. So far, the Department of Internal Affairs has turned down 22 applications from people wanting to be independent celebrants because they would not perform marriage ceremonies for same-sex couples. Jacob McSweeney reports.
Some of those rejected as marriage celebrants say it's unfair, but Natasha Atting, who will marry her fiancé, singer Anika Moa, this summer, says it's right they be declined. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, is now waiting on advice from her officials after the matter was raised with her. Nearly 700 people have applied to become independent celebrants since September 2015. Under law changes made in 2013, celebrants from a religious group as well as other approved organisations don't have to marry same-sex couples if it's at odds with their beliefs. But if they want to be independent and won't carry out same-sex weddings, the Department of Internal Affairs Registrar General Jeff Montgomery says the door is shut to them.
The majority of marriage celebrants in New Zealand are linked to religious organisations. So anyone who has got strong religious or philosophical views and wish to express those through the marriage process should be an organisational marriage celebrant, not an independent marriage celebrant.
Jeff Montgomery says there are 8,000 celebrants affiliated with religious organisations and 2,000 who operate independently. But one of the people who had her application declined, Leslie Erickson, says being part of a religious organisation isn't as easy as it sounds.
I don't belong to a church at the moment. I have previously belonged to 2 large churches, and I'm well aware that you can't just roll up to a church and say, hey, I want to be a marriage celebrant, and they'll take you on. Usually it's the top reverends or pastors who are employed by the church, and there's only a few of them that are allowed to take ceremonies.
She says there are plenty of celebrants who will marry same-sex couples, and she doesn't think she should be punished because of her beliefs.
I was thrilled to actually think, yeah, I can do this and I can do it well. I know I can do it well. For me, it just ticked all the boxes. I know it goes back to belief, but I know I couldn't take a ceremony that was representing something I didn't believe in. And I don't think I should be judged, really, for believing that way.
But Natasha Atting says the Department of Internal Affairs was right to decline Leslie Erickson and others.
When I marry the woman I love, the law is going to recognise the commitment that we make. The law recognises that it's the same commitment that a heterosexual couple makes, and that we're married and she'll be my wife. And thank goodness that we live in a country where the law is on our side. Discrimination, prejudice, these things have just had their day. If you don't like bread, don't become a baker.
Beth Brash has recently been approved as a celebrant and will orchestrate her first wedding in 2 weeks for a same-sex couple. She agrees with Natasha Atting. If someone wants to be an independent celebrant, they should do their job within the restraints of the law.
That's what you sign up for. Basically, if you're an independent celebrant, you are signing up to do that. So if you don't believe in it and you will turn people down if they're a same-sex couple, then actually I don't think they should apply in the first place.
The Minister of Justice, Amy Adams, has legislative overview of the Marriage Act and says the issue hadn't been raised with her before this. In a statement, she says she is looking into the matter. For Checkpoint, Ko Jacob McSweeney, Tēnei.
Let's go to Napier, where something of a drought ended yesterday, which meant the scheduled Chapel Hadley one-day international cricket match at McLean Park never even got to a start. Punters waited for 5 hours in vain after rain fell in the morning and the early afternoon until eventually the match was abandoned. New Zealand Cricket has now launched an inquiry and will look at whether McLean Park is fit to host future internationals. I asked Napier Mayor Bill Dalton if the park's outfield is, well, predisposed to being a little bit boggy.
No, that's too big a jump to make. The fact is, we are looking at this. I mean, no one's more disappointed about this whole thing than the Napier City Council, I can assure you. And we're really disappointed for our people. But the fact is, we're not going to leap to conclusions until we've had a good look at it. We've had a high-level meeting with with New Zealand Cricket.
You're having a high-level meeting with Radio New Zealand now. That's
I know.
That's excellent. So you've had a high-level meeting with New Zealand Cricket.
Yep, and we have agreed to do a full investigation around the whole park. They're wanting to work with us. New Zealand Cricket is determined to continue using Napier because they know how good it is.
It's a lovely venue. It's a lovely venue. But in fact, yesterday evening was one of those days in Napier where you're just really happy to be there, right? The sea was sparkling, the sun was shining, and they couldn't play cricket.
Well, that's absolutely untrue. The sea was sparkling, no question, but the sun wasn't shining. And what happened was it rained from about 8:30 until somewhere around 2 o'clock. Now, sure, it wasn't huge amounts of rain. You must realise that this is a sand-based park, and you have to water a sand-based park, the grass on it, otherwise it simply burns off and dries, or dries off and burns. And so when we had over 40 days of no rain, and look, luck would have it, and the rumour around town is that Federated Farmers are actually paying New Zealand Cricket to come to Hawke's Bay so that it'll rain. And the situation was that we had drizzly rain. When the rain stopped, there was not 1 ounce of drying in the air. There was very little wind, and you could actually still feel moisture in the air. So there was no natural drying in the air at all. I'm not saying what the problem was because as yet we haven't determined what the problem is. but certainly you can rest assured that we're working with New Zealand Cricket to get to the bottom of it.
But Bill, you are doing a fantastic job of defending your patch, and I know that it's important to you that you get the games here, the cricket games here, and the All Blacks have played there too previously, and also, you'd like some more Super Rugby games and all of that stuff. But the fact of the matter is that it's my sense, and I'm not having a go, but it's my sense that Eden Park or Seddon Park or Hagley would have dried yesterday afternoon and there would have been cricket. There's something about the outfield there that makes it particularly susceptible, isn't there?
Well, if that is the case, then that will be determined by this investigation between New Zealand Cricket and our own staff. I mean, we've got a world-class groundsman who has prepared a wicket that has given us some absolute world-class games over the years. Yesterday was a big disappointment. We need to know why.
What do you say to the punters? Obviously, you want them to come back.
Oh, absolutely we do. I mean, this was one game that turned out to be a bit of a disaster. The fact is, we have for many years put on some absolute top-level games of cricket, and I was one of the punters who sat there for 5 hours waiting for the cricket to start yesterday, and I can sympathise with everyone. The fact is, we will get it right, rest assured.
What's the weather like now, Bill?
The weather is hot as hell, blowing a gale, and would have dried the park in about 10 minutes yesterday.
Isn't that Murphy's Law? Bill Dalton, the Mayor of Napier. Coming up on Checkpoint, the government declares a drought in Northland, and at the other end of the country, Cheviot locals come to the rescue of thousands of eels, some of them endangered, after the St Anne's Lagoon completely dries up. A community rescue effort, but first, RNZ headlines with Paul Brennan in Wellington.
Thank you, John. In our headlines, the British drug company Reckitt Benckiser has been fined a record $1.08 million in the Auckland District Court for making misleading claims about its pharmaceuticals. The company faced 10 charges relating to its Nurofen painkiller products. The Prime Minister says the option of moving the National Waitangi Day celebrations around the country is worth investigating. Bill English will be in Auckland as a guest of Ngāti Whātua on Waitangi Day. The Immigration Minister is not softening his stance on the 9 Indian students fighting to avoid deportation. The students say they were duped by dodgy immigration agents in India, but the Minister says they have committed immigration fraud and they have to go. The Ministry for Primary Industries has detected norovirus in rock oysters harvested north of Auckland. It was alerted to the issue by local health authorities after 11 people became ill eating oysters from Mahurangi Harbour near Warkworth. Diplomatic efforts have been underway to ease tensions between the United States and Australia after the stormy phone call between Malcolm Turnbull and Donald Trump. 2 leading figures and President Trump's staff have held what they call a productive meeting with Australia's US Ambassador in Washington, Joe Hockey. Northland is officially in drought. The Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, told Mid-North farmers this afternoon that after months without significant rain, the region has been declared to be in a medium-scale adverse drought event. Mr Guy says that triggers help to get farmers through the season. And search teams have been combing the Hutt River and Wellington Harbour this afternoon for a missing 19-year-old swimmer. The local man went swimming with a friend late last night in Lower Hutt, but only one of the pair came out of the water. The police say the river at this point is very deep, wide and unpredictable. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Which is in about 26 minutes. Thanks, Paul. Giles Beckford, our business editor, next. But very quickly before then, the meat industry is adamant its beef is clean after Russia moved to ban imports from New Zealand. Russia's agricultural safety watchdog will temporarily halt New Zealand beef imports from Monday because it says it found a banned substance in some beef samples. Fish imports are also at risk, with the Russian body saying it discovered traces of mercury in some samples. Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara, reports.
Russia's agricultural safety watchdog claims it found the feed additive ractopamine in some beef samples. Ractopamine, which promotes muscle growth, is banned in several countries, including Russia and China. The chief executive of the Meat Industry Association, Tim Ritchie, says the additive is prohibited in sheep and beef feed, although it is allowed in the pork industry.
Our MPI run a residue monitoring system, and they would regularly test for this product, ractopamine, in sheep and in cattle, and my understanding that's never been found, and certainly the last report that I looked at indicated 0. So I think that we can be confident that there is nothing there.
New Zealand's beef exports are worth about $3 billion a year. Sales to Russia, which mainly consists of beef livers, stood at less than $10 million. The Special Agricultural Trade Envoy Mike Peterson says the ban will be disruptive.
Everything like this causes disruption because it just creates uncertainty in the market, and it also creates uncertainty, with product that might be on the water as well. So, it will cause disruption. We'd rather not have it. But it's a reality of being in the food business.
Mr Peterson's confident further testing will show New Zealand's beef is clean and says it won't affect the country's relationship with Moscow.
We have had a history of trading and doing business with Russia over many years, but this is just something, as I say, that is often comes up from time to time, not just with Russia but with other countries as well, and we work through it in a very professional, methodical manner.
The decision caught the Ministry for Primary Industries unawares, and it is currently seeking more information. It insists New Zealand's food standards are among the highest in the world. For Checkpoint, Patrick Amara.
Thanks, Patrick. On the topic of trade, business editor Giles Beckford, who joins us now live from Wellington, reckons the torch of free trade hasn't been completely extinguished, Giles.
No, apparently not, John. It would appear that the Mexicans in particular, who of course are in the front line of trade wars at the moment, or potential trade wars, they're certainly eager to pick up something out of the ashes of TPP, and they've decided to start doing trade deals, one-on-one trade deals with 6 countries. New Zealand is one of them. Australia, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore and Vietnam are the others. And you have to say that clearly there's self-interest in it from their point of view. They're facing what could be a pretty hefty trade stoush with the United States if Donald Trump keeps acting and talking the way that he has done. But we're not inconsiderable trade partners, $700 million worth last year, mainly dairy and meat from our point of view. Cars, technological instruments, engineering components from Mexico coming back. It might be a difficult one to do. The big issue would be agriculture, because New Zealand clearly will be looking for better access, and they're very sensitive sectors in Mexico, so they'd be looking to at least give some degree of protection. Mexico in the TPP deal did offer a gradual opening up of further quotas for dairy produce from various countries, so that would be one avenue. But certainly it seems for now at least that the free trade deals, they're not dead and buried. There's still some trying to make some sort of momentum on them.
If Fish and Paykel have a base in Mexico, don't they?
Fisher and Paykel Healthcare have got quite a large factory in Tijuana. They're making medical equipment, breathing masks, humidifiers, that sort of thing, all aimed at being sold into the US market. Now, if the stoush develops between the United States and Mexico, Fisher and Paykel told us last year, very simply, that they would send equipment made in New Zealand to the United States, and the produce from Mexico would go to other markets. So they didn't seem to be particularly worried about it.
What happened on the markets at the end of the week, Al Giles?
A positive day today on the top 50 share market, up 41 points, that's about 0.5% to 7094. The New Zealand dollar, a little bit more cheerful than yesterday, 72.8 US cents, and just sitting around 95 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks, Giles. Have a great weekend. It's coming up to 21 minutes to 6. The family of an Invercargill teen killed in a car crash in which one of her friends was driving recklessly have heard for the first time today about the final traumatic moments of her life. In a packed Dunedin courtroom, a young man was sentenced for taking his friend's life and seriously injuring 3 others. Otago Southern reporter Lydia Anderson was there.
20-year-old Dunedin man Shay Richards stood stone-faced in the dock before a packed public gallery filled with the family and friends of Nikita Strange, who was 18 when she died in the July 2015 crash. The court was told how Richards failed to stop at a giveaway intersection after driving an overloaded car of teens recklessly through Dunedin. A ute smashed into the teen's car, sending it spinning into a parked car and a wall. The ute driver Anthony Odering gave a graphic victim impact statement, detailing how he desperately tried to perform CPR on Ms. Strange after Richards had walked away from the crash.
I got into the car next to her, and although I knew she must have been badly hurt because she wasn't conscious, I remember thinking how peaceful and beautiful she looked. That mental image haunts me.
He tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation but heard a deep gurgling sound from Ms. Strange, then tried chest compressions. Fighting back tears, Mr. Odering said there was a point when he realised she was dead.
I'm a father, and I know that if my daughter had died in my arms, I would be saying goodbye to her right there and right then. Nikita's family couldn't be there, so I said goodbye to her for them, kissed her on the cheek and wished her Godspeed.
Ms. Strange and her friends had set off from Invercargill to Christchurch in the early hours of that morning, but when they got to Dunedin they realised they didn't have enough petrol. She had contacted Richards, who helped the teens do a petrol drive-off, then drove their car erratically through the city streets, ignoring their pleas to slow down. Richards' lawyer, Anne Stevens, told the court her client had always accepted responsibility for the crash.
At 18, and as a learner driver, he lacked both the maturity and the experience to recognise the situation that he was placing himself and others in. His focus was on doing what he had been asked by a friend and then getting out of there.
More than 10 victim impact statements were read on behalf of Ms. Strange's family and the other teens involved in the crash, describing their anger towards Richards and the emptiness in their lives caused by Ms. Strange's death. Justice David Gendel said Richards had previous driving convictions and had continued to infringe his learner licence conditions after Ms. Strange's death. He said he was not convinced Richards was completely remorseful for the crash. Richards was also sentenced over 3 counts of reckless driving causing injury and 1 of theft, and was disqualified from driving for 4 years. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
Thanks, Lydia. Let's head back to Northland. We began our show tonight in Waitangi. The entire region is now officially in the midst of a drought. There's been no rain in the Northland region since last October, barring the odd sprinkle, and 150mm drop that barely touched the surface. The ground was so dry it simply disappeared. The Primary Industries Minister Nathan Guy says farmers face a tough time as the drought continues to bite and conditions will get worse.
It's a matter of everyone coming together, which they're doing through all their support networks. Farmers aren't dealing with this on their own, so they need to talk to their neighbours, talk to their bankers, get their budgets out, make early decisions. They're already making those early decisions. This may jolt a few into making further decisions, which is going to be really important as they move into the autumn. I guess the concern I have, if they don't get some decent rain soon, it's hard to get that autumn grass growth, build up that feed reserve going into the winter.
Yeah, in short, Northland needs some rain. Meanwhile, St Anne's Lagoon, just a few kilometres north of Cheviot, has completely dried up. There isn't one drop of water. We've gone to North Canterbury now. Of course, the lagoon relies on rainfall, but rainfall hasn't been falling in North Canterbury for a couple of years, really. So, with no water to swim in, thousands of eels, including some from an endangered species, have been left struggling in the mud, while others have already died. If you're watching, we're going to show you something, and if not, we can describe it. It's the photo of the lagoon full of water from December of last year. It's ducks on top. It looks absolutely beautiful, big, blue and full. Now, we are going to change the photo because Environment Canterbury Park Ranger Makarene Rupeni was among about 40 people who tried to relocate the eels today because there was simply no water left. I asked him how they did it and how many they've managed to move.
We moved several thousand today, all through the day. It's been a really good mission effort with everyone. You know, we've had a lot of community groups come on board. We had Cheviot high school kids come along and toiled up and jumped in and got a few eels, got quite muddy.
And if you hadn't have moved the eels today, what would have happened to them? Do you think they would have made it through the weekend?
It's hard to say. I would say they possibly would have a few days, but some would be dying over the weekend. As it is, you could see with the lagoon being so dry, you know, there was scattered dead eels all around the dry spots.
So there are dead eels everywhere, are there?
Yeah, there was.
What's happened there? Has it just been an unusually dry summer, or are you competing? Are you competing for the water?
Up here in North Canterbury, it's been a very dry. The last 3 years, we've been in drought, and we just haven't had the rain. And that wetland lagoon it's a rain-fed lagoon. So yeah, I believe I was talking to an older lady earlier today, and she said the last time she'd seen it dry was back in the 60s.
Wow. So 50 years since it's been this dry.
Yeah. With our tributaries and rivers drying up through the summer periods, quite often I'll go out and be watching and checking on the rivers and do a bit of native fish relocation when it's needed.
And they've all been relocated into the Waio, have they?
Yeah, just a little tributary off the Waio, and it's only just about 300 metres off the Waio River. So a nice, really good habitat, overhanging trees, nice muddy banks, a really good spot for them, so they can make their mind up if they want to hit the main river or just stay in the little tributary.
This is a stupid towny question, but I hate eels and I avoid them at all costs. How do they react when you pick them up? Do they try and squirm and escape, or are they at some level reasonably calm during the transfer process?
They do try and escape, and then they go calm, and then when we release them, most of them would just really go for it. They're looking forward to getting into some habitat, and there's the odd few that were a wee bit dazed and just needed to acclimatise to getting back into water, because these things were dry, there was no water, they were just in mud.
That lovely rescue work being done in North Canterbury, one of the eels is seriously endangered. So in fact, they could potentially be saving a species. Nice work, you guys. Let's go not too far away to Christchurch, and a low-income suburb there that has a new school, a bumper roll and a sense of something good having happened. Haiata is the first public school in Christchurch to cater for all ages, replacing 3 eastern suburb schools which were closed after the earthquakes. Those eastern suburbs so hard hit, of course. Rachel Graham joined more than 900 students for the first day at their new school.
Hundreds of students, ranging from those starting school for the first time to pupils in their final year, gathered on the grounds of Haiata for songs and speeches, and were told their school will be a significant addition to the recovery of Eastern Christchurch. Principal Andy Kaifong says Haiata is unique because it's an area-style school in an urban setting and has adopted a new style of learning which moves away from one teacher standing in front of a class of 30 students. The newly built school has large open-plan classrooms, described as flexible learning spaces, which cater for up to 300 students at a time.
What I think people struggle with is the ratios of teacher to students at our school are the same as any other state-funded school in New Zealand. So, for example, we could have 15 teachers and up to 6 or 7 other teacher aides in that space. So the ability for kids to connect with more significant adults is a real feature of learning here.
Mr Kaifong says they had expected around 920 students, but their role now stands at 950, which will require him to do some quick recruitment. Fian Esil says enrolling her son for Year 8 at Haiata was a difficult decision, and she did have to give some thought to sending her son to an all-in-one primary high school.
It did cross our mind, but not for long, because they did say there was a separation, they're not all going to be in together, but it makes it, it just makes it easier because he just is still one school, so he doesn't really have to leave.
Koya, Navaya and Maya are heading into years 4, 5 and 6, and are all very excited about the new school.
Pretty big. It's pretty awesome, really awesome.
What do you like about it?
I like the classrooms because
the classrooms
really
are so
big.
nice and big space. I like how there's drinking fountains inside, so if it rains or something, you can just easily don't go outside and stuff.
A big school now, isn't it, with kids from little kids to big kids? What do you think about that? Is that good?
That's good. So
really
the big kids can look after us, and
And I've got cousins here. Yeah, that's how I like it.
Principal Andy Kaifong says after a long wait, Haiata represents a new dawn of learning for Aranui. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
Rachel Graham from Haiata. It's 10 to 6. The Children's Watchdog wants MPs to stop work on major changes to the education system until children themselves are consulted. Judge Andrew Beecroft expressed his astonishment that children haven't been asked for their views on the Education Amendment Bill to Parliament's Education and Science Select Committee today. We covered this last night. The bill will let the government set national priorities for schools, approve online schools and make changes to when 5-year-olds can start school. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen was at the Select Committee today, and John filed this report.
Judge Beecroft held up pictures of a stop sign and a go sign when he appeared before the Select Committee. And it was the stop sign that he held up first.
The progress of this bill, in our view, should be stopped until there has been meaningful, appropriate and proper consultation with children. And it is frankly, from my perspective, astonishing that this bill has been prepared and reached this far without any demonstrable occurrence or example of consultation with children.
Judge Beecroft says New Zealand is obliged by international law to consult children on things that concern them.
Article 12 of the United Nations Convention states that children have the right to express their views and that their views should be given due weight in all matters that affect them. And it would be hard to think of a matter that affected them more than their own education.
Judge Beecroft says there's nothing gimmicky about seeking children's views and it adds richness to decision making. Other organisations appearing before the committee agreed. Previously, Sarah Te One from lobby group Action for Children and Youth Aotearoa said the lack of consultation was odd.
It's puzzling, even disturbing, that this bill is completely silent on how children and young people can have a say about the changes or in any ongoing way as active partners in education provision. As one child has said to us when asked about who should make decisions about him, weird. Why wouldn't they ask us?
And the president of the Principals Federation, Fetu Cormac, said seeking kids' views is what schools do.
I'm here to speak on behalf of our 2,200 members, but I also mentioned there are hundreds of thousands of kids who are in their schools. I'm here for the children. In every school, we ask our students, what do you want to learn? We ask for their voice, we ask for their feedback, and absolutely they should be considered.
But the Education Minister, Hekia Parata, has indicated there won't be any halt in proceedings. She says in a statement she wants the bill passed into law as quickly as possible, and she's confident children have already had many opportunities to give their views about the proposed changes. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Lots of feedback coming in tonight. Thank you. Hi, John. New Zealand cricket's fault. This is McLean Park in Napier, of course. If they had a reserve day today, for example, the game could have gone ahead in fine weather. Tell them to sort it out. Cheers, Bruce. We'll pass that on, Bruce. If you're listening, New Zealand cricket, sort it out, says Bruce. I'm no cricket fan, but I felt sorry for them yesterday. The only day for weeks when we had no wind and lots of rain. Just unbelievable, says Mai. Great idea to celebrate the signing of the treaty at all signing places around the country. While Waitangi was the first signing place, it's all pure heritage, says John. Look, John, says Anthony, Waitangi Day is in desperate need of a makeover. People have negative perceptions of it. They are deaf to the protests and turn off when it's discussed. Most people would be happy if you ignored it entirely, says Anthony, speaking on behalf of most people. It would be interesting to see commemorations occur in parts of the country that didn't see the treaty in 1840, or on the marae of iwi that didn't sign it. Of course, some iwi didn't sign. I don't see the protests subsiding anytime soon, and for good reason, says Pete in Wellington. Lots of people saying, just shut up and attend Bill English. It's one day, go along and listen. It can't be that hard after all. Thank you for your feedback. Earlier this week, Te Papa sent us a bug slider, a mini burger made up of chicken mince blended with locusts, served with kumara chips and accompanied by a lime and aioli. The slider was designed to run alongside Te Papa's Bug Lab exhibition. During the show, we were contacted by Peter Ranrup. His company, Anteater, supplied the Locusts for the slider. Really, that's what they do. We sent Conyon Young out to Peter's kitchen today to find out a bit more.
We supply edible bugs to chefs and restaurants around the world. We're primarily a sustainable protein business, so the three of the biggest, most pressing issues on the planet right now are freshwater use, land use, and CO2 emissions. The single biggest contributor to all three of those is protein production. So land use for beef, lamb, that kind of thing, emissions from the same kind of thing, and water use. Now, I learnt quite recently that insects use 2,000 times less water than conventional protein, 100 times fewer emissions, and need 10 times less land. Now, it makes perfect sense to be farming them and eating them. And the more I looked into it, I'm like, well, there's 2 billion people around the world that already do it. So anything that's might replace beef and lamb needs to already be established around the world. It's not in Western culture, but it is in other places. And 80% of cultures around the world eat them as well. So
wow, so we Europeans are kind of the odd ones out in terms of our taste for bugs.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually the minority here, which is surprising to a lot of people.
So where do you export these bugs to?
We don't export yet. We're investigating it at the moment. We're local entirely, but I suspect Asia will be a big market for us, and the US as well, and even Europe. Europe's been growing really fast.
And what is it about New Zealand bugs, especially these native New Zealand locusts, that they might be interested in?
It's the quality. So at Anteater, we will only do bugs that taste good. If they don't taste good, we won't sell them. So how we make them taste good is the diet and the species of bug. The locusts, for example, are grass-fed, and they're really fussy eaters. They only eat a few species of grass. And
that's down in Southland, I understand. There's actually a locust farm down there.
Yeah, that's right. There's one certified food-grade locust grower, and we're buying them out. We need more farms here in New Zealand.
So how would you describe this farm? If I went down to Southland, what would I see?
It's not very big, about the size of a small shed, and it's farmed sort of barn-style, like barned chickens perhaps, but the advantage of locusts is they are gregarious, meaning they like being close together. So there's an ethical plus there, but also a production plus, as sort of the barn-style farming tends to be cheaper than the outdoor farming.
A bit of a tough sell though, I mean, compared to say steak and chicken and fish. I mean, how do you convince people that these are another source of protein?
It's a number of things. So typically we've found 1/3 of people are super excited. They can't wait. They already know all the health and environmental benefits. 1/3 of people are kind of on the fence, and the other 1/3 are not interested. They're really conservative eaters. Now we've found we can convince that middle 1/3 99% of the time if they just watch someone else eat one. It's all you have to do. Is once one person in the group's tried one, they will all try it, which I think is a really good thing from a business point of view, but also it's that social proof. Like, it's an unknown. You don't want to be the guinea pig, so it's the best way to educate people is to have them actually try it, and that seems to work for us.
Just one thing occurred to me actually. I was hoping that I wouldn't see these bugs crawling around before we put them in the fry pan. They've obviously they've passed away beforehand. But how do you actually go about making sure that these things are killed safely?
So this is another major plus of farming insects is they're cold-blooded. So they move proportional to the temperature. So to euthanize them, all we do is freeze them, and they just slow down until they go to sleep and stop, and that's it.
After 6 tonight, we'll go back to Peter's kitchen where he'll be serving Conan locust kebabs. You are a very good sport, Conan. I was just watching those frying up and thinking, oh, Conan. So that's after 6. This is an odd old story. It's just breaking out of Australia. Not of much moment, but indicative of the strange kind of tensions at large in the world at present. A staff member in Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's office has been suspended after posting an image of a T-shirt emblazoned with the words, I'm going to say this very slowly, tuck frump, to Facebook. Yvette Kerr, who is the executive assistant to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, posted the image to Facebook in November. Nothing happened until that terrible phone call between Trump and Turnbull yesterday, and suddenly a vet is suspended. After 6, by the way, we are going to a city called Victoria in Texas, where the mosque was burnt down in most suspicious circumstances, and the local synagogue said, "Here, come and share with us." Feedback. Hi, John. If policing is to be more efficient, should we consider having separate crime and traffic police forces again? As the system is currently, the cops simply don't care about burglaries. Frequently, they'll not even attend the scene to ask questions or gather evidence. In the meantime, I want to know how much police time is wasted on giving road tickets for people going 11k over the speed limit. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you everyone for your feedback. Coming up to the news at 6 after 6, we're going to Shannon Honui-Thompson, who is joining us live from Waitangi. Stay with us. Here are the Friday Night Pips.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The Prime Minister says a suggestion to take Waitangi Day celebrations on the road is worth investigating. Bill English has attended his one and only formal event at Waitangi itself this weekend, meeting with the iwi Chairs Forum. On Monday, he will be hosted in Auckland by Ngāti Whātua. Mr English says there could be merit in celebrating Waitangi Day in different regions.
That's been the most common suggestion I've heard from the public and from iwi. So I think it's worth investigating, because the treaty was signed in quite a number of places, and I suppose the benefit of it would be that New Zealanders who don't live in the far north see a bit more of the relevance to their local area.
Bill English. When asked if Waitangi Day should be celebrated elsewhere, iwi leaders said Waitangi has very special significance. The British drug company Reckitt Benckiser has been fined a record $1.08 million in the Auckland District Court for making misleading claims about its pharmaceuticals. The company had faced 10 charges relating to its Nurofen painkiller products. The Commerce Commission Chairman, Mark Berry, brought the prosecution, saying people paid a premium $7 a packet, believing products were tailored to pain in a particular part of the body, where in fact they all worked the same. The Commission says this was a very serious matter, and that was reflected in the highest penalty ever awarded under the Fair Trading Act. Nurofen's manufacturers say they cooperated fully with the Commerce Commission and have changed their packaging. The Immigration Minister says the 9 Indian students planning to seek sanctuary in a church to avoid deportation are not victims and need to leave New Zealand. The students say it's not fair they're being deported because they were duped by dodgy immigration agents in India. But the Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the students have committed immigration fraud, and anyone who submits a visa application is responsible for ensuring the information in it is correct.
What I would encourage anybody who finds themselves in this situation to do is to leave New Zealand voluntarily, whatever the circumstances that led them to being in that situation. It can only be made worse by intransigence, fear and hiding.
Michael Woodhouse would not speculate on whether officials would evict them from a church. The Children's Commissioner wants changes to the Education Act stopped until children have been asked what they want. Judge Andrew Beecroft has told Parliament's Education and Science Select Committee he's astonished children have not been consulted about the Education Amendment Bill. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The bill will let the government tell schools what to prioritise, create online schools and make changes to when 5-year-olds can start school. But Judge Beecroft says it should be put on hold. He says the bill will have a major impact on children and they must be consulted. Other organisations, including the Educational Institute Union and the lobby group Action for Children and Youth Aotearoa, agree. The Education Minister, Hekia Parata, says young people have had many opportunities to comment and provided more than 200 submissions on the bill. This is John Gerritsen.
The fiancé of singer Anika Moa says people who want to be independent marriage celebrants shouldn't apply in the first place if they're not prepared to wed same-sex couples. The Department of Internal Affairs has turned down 22 applications from people wanting to become independent marriage celebrants because they don't want to marry same-sex couples. The rejected applicants are not from religious groups which would exempt them from performing same-sex weddings. The former broadcaster Natasha Utting is set to marry her fiancé Anika Moa this summer and says if people want to carry out marriages, they must follow the law.
The law recognises that it's the same commitment that a heterosexual couple makes, and that we're married and she'll be my wife. And thank goodness that we live in a country where the law is on our side. Discrimination, prejudice, these things have just had their day.
Natasha Utting there. Holiday weekend snarl-ups north of Wellington are causing delays. Drivers are taking up to 2 hours and 20 minutes to get from Pukirua Bay to Waitangi on State Highway 1. There's also heavy highway traffic up through the Ngaronga Gorge and out on State Highway 2 to Petone. In Auckland, traffic is building north and south out of the city ahead of the long weekend. Heading north on State Highway 1, traffic is heavy from Albany to Silverdale, and there are queues just before the Johnston Hill tunnels. On the southern motorway, traffic is heavy from Mount Wellington to Takanini. Westbound, it's slow from the port through to the northern and northwestern link, then heavy from Rosebank to Te Atatu. Search teams have been combing the Hutt River and Wellington Harbour this afternoon for a missing 19-year-old swimmer. The local man went swimming with a friend at about 10:30 last night near Belmont School in Lower Hutt, but only one of the pair came out of the water. The dive squad has not joined the search as the river is currently too unpredictable. The Greater Wellington Regional Council says the river flow is 100 times larger than this time last year. It's 4.5 minutes past 6. On to sport now. The New Zealand women's sevens team have easily won their opening game at the Sydney leg of the Sevens World Series, brushing aside Papua New Guinea 34-5. The Black Fern Sevens, who lead the series standings after winning the first round in Dubai, play France just after 7 o'clock before rounding out pool play against Canada at 9:45. The New Zealand men's team begin the defence of their Sydney title tomorrow. The New Zealand Davis Cup tennis team is expecting a somewhat hostile crowd in their Asia-Oceania Group 1 tie in India in Pune this weekend. New Zealand's highest-ranked players, Tim Tierney and Ruben Stratham, will open up singles tonight, while Michael Venus and Artem Sitak are in action in tomorrow's doubles. New Zealand captain Alistair Hunt says they're looking forward to it.
They reckon they're going to have a full stadium, so that'll be good. We are expecting a pretty vocal crowd, and we're actually looking forward to it. I think it adds to the atmosphere, and that's part of an away tie.
Alistair Hunt. And the New Zealand golfer Gareth Patterson is tied for second, just one shot off the lead following the second round of the Victorian PGA Championship. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the health of 1/3 of New Zealand's population is in the hands of one person. I'll talk to Lester Levy. Goodness knows how he has the time. We'll find out more about the editor of Genius, who nurtured Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe, Ernest Hemingway, and Don Henley of the Eagles. Thoreau is one of his heroes, but he's not planning any civil disobedience himself right now. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Thank you, Kim. Now the short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday, from Met Service. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, patchy drizzle clearing Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula this evening, then in Northland overnight tonight. Mostly fine tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, fine apart from isolated showers this afternoon and evening. Waikato to Wellington, that includes the Central High Country, also Hawke's Bay and Waitangi, fine today. Cloud will increase tomorrow and a few showers develop about Tararua range from the afternoon tomorrow. It will be fine for Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Buller and Northern Westland, fine spells. Showers develop this evening, clearing tomorrow evening. Southern Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, easing to showers tomorrow morning, then clearing in Westland later. Otago, excluding Clutha, fine intervals, isolated showers this evening. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods, isolated showers about coastal areas, and long fine intervals for the Chathams over the weekend. It is exactly 8 minutes past 6. News and weather again at 7.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul. The Prime Minister says he wants to stop or consider stopping the annual ritual of going to Waitangi and take the celebrations on the road to other parts of the country. On Monday, Bill English will attend Waitangi Day celebrations, not in Waitangi, but in Auckland. He decided to snub Waitangi after being told by the Te Tii Marae Committee that he would not be able to speak during the pōwhiri. He could speak after it. However, he was in Waitangi today to meet with influential iwi leaders. Te Manu Kōrahi reporter Shannon Haunui-Thompson joins us from Waitangi. Shannon, it's a bit of a dodgy old live view cross to you up there. So I'll ask you questions and then just let you talk, basically. What did the Prime Minister and the iwi leaders discuss?
Well, the main agenda point today was the
the change in the child, youth and families legislation and the shift away, the possible shift away from putting Māori children with their whānau, hapu or iwi. Obviously the iwi leaders are opposed to that, and they said they had great discussions with the Prime Minister today to tell them that, you know, they really think Māori children should remain within their cultural context. They also spoke about fresh water. I mean, fresh water has been on the table for quite a while. In the press conference they kind of said that they told Bill English that they wanted to the iwi leaders want the same rights as a corporate bottling company does. Not that they really want to bottle the water, however, they would like the rights to if they wanted to. Also, they said that, you know, fresh water is about maintaining the mana o te wai. I also heard earlier the guys discussing that the iwi leaders talked about how Bill English made the announcement that he's thinking about moving the annual ritual of coming up here to Waitangi, taking it on the road. I mean, they said, you know, Waitangi is really significant to Māori, and whether the Prime Minister comes or not, the commemorations will continue with or without him, which we're actually seeing happen this year. I mean, he's not coming here to Waitangi this year. The Deputy Prime Minister, Paula Bennett, will be here to represent the party, but he's decided to go on the road anyway. So the celebrations are still continuing without him.
Shannon, it is the most beautiful evening up there. Gosh, what a glorious background you're standing in front of. Can you monitor the reaction from Ngāpuhi and the iwi leaders who were there today to the idea that the Prime Minister might take a sort of Waitangi roadshow around New Zealand? What did the iwi leaders think of that?
Well, the iwi leaders said that Waitangi is a very significant place, and really the Prime Minister should be coming here. However, if he decides not to come here, the celebrations and significance will still remain.
Yeah.
I spoke to Peter Paraone before I spoke to you, and he's obviously from the New Zealand First Party, but also the current chair of the National Waitangi Trust. And he's really annoyed at the Te Tii Marae Committee, who say basically it's their fault that Ngāpuhi have lost the only chance they get to have the Prime Minister's ear as such. So he is really annoyed. He blames the committee at the Te Tii Marae fully for what's happened and for the Prime Minister actually considering leaving here. I mean, because it's not just that the Prime Minister comes to Te Tii Marae, he usually also hosts a breakfast with all the major Ngāpuhi leaders here after the dawn service, which isn't happening this year. So this year, Bill English will be having that breakfast with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei.
Thanks, Shannon. We're losing you a little bit there, but it does look glorious. I hope you have a wonderful weekend up at Waitangi. Shannon Honui-Thompson crossing to us live from a slightly ropey, although rather glorious live view shot. We should say that the Governor-General, Dame Patsy Reddy, will be welcomed onto Te Tii Marae tomorrow. And on Sunday, all political parties, including the Deputy Prime Minister Paula Bennett, will also be welcomed onto the marae. We should also point out that Ngāpuhi say that they've lost their one chance a year to speak to the Prime Minister. It does seem extraordinary, really, as an aside, that Ngāpuhi, which is New Zealand's largest iwi by number, I think 120,000 people describe themselves as affiliated to Ngāpuhi, get one chance a year to talk to the Prime Minister. We will discuss that at greater length on another occasion. Victims of crime have mixed views on whether the government's pledge to invest $500 million in the police and to recruit 880 more frontline officers will do much good. While some believe the investment will make a difference, others say without addressing the nation's P epidemic or police culture, it will achieve little. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
Emma James was a high school student in New Plymouth when she and her partner were attacked by a street gang in broad daylight. The couple were waiting for a ride outside Pukekura Park when they were set upon out of the blue.
So they came up and they punched Jiren in the chest, and then he tried to take another swing at him, but Jiren moved. And then I stood up and I tried to get in between them, and he kicked me in the stomach while he was wearing steel cap boots, and I went down.
Now 21 years old, Emma says it took a long time to get over the attack.
I was quite scared of seeing them out in town again because I worked in town, and it was always crossing my mind, like, what if I see them again? Will they recognise me? Will they come back? Wasn't sure if they'd try anything else, but fortunately that never happened. So I wouldn't say I felt unsafe, but it was definitely in the back of my mind for about a year afterwards.
Emma now lives in Cambridge. She believes having more officers on the street would make a difference, and she is supporting a petition to reinstate the police night shift in the Waikato town. Gary is a tūpō plumber. His recent trip to Melbourne was ruined when his home was burgled and his duck shooting gear, including 2 rifles and the family car, was stolen. Gary says it was a sickening feeling.
Yeah, you feel violated like that. It took my wife a while, more than me, to settle down. She still had a habit of picking up all the keys and your wallet and things you used to leave just sitting on the bench at night and putting beside your bed and things like that. And leaves the light on at night now, instead of we never used to leave the light on at night.
But Gary is not convinced more police is the answer.
I wasn't that impressed with the response we got, because my mother actually found it, and the response wasn't very good at all. They said, oh, well, that was, I think it was a Friday or Saturday. They said, oh, we'll come round on a Monday and have a look at what's been going on. But as soon as my mother told her there was guns involved, they did come round.
Gary says his wife played detective herself and found the car parked up in town, something he thought even time-staffed police should have been able to do. Ian is a Waitara father who found himself caught up in a home invasion at his son's place just last week.
My son and a couple of others returned home, and they accosted these 4 guys, or 2 in particular, and told them to leave the property. But these guys were, one of them in particular, was really high on drugs.
The Taranaki man says there were weapons involved and someone could easily have been hurt. He says the police response on the day was excellent, but he doesn't think throwing more officers at the streets will solve New Zealand's crime problems.
I mean, it's good to be policing them, but they're the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The real focus needs to be on the people producing these drugs and the availability of drugs, the serious drugs, because it just changes these people into monsters.
Under the policy announced by Prime Minister Bill English, the number of sworn officers will rise to nearly 9,800 by June 2021. There will be more staff for up to 20 rural and regional police stations, and all police districts will receive extra officers, with police deciding how many will go where based on need. For Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tene.
6:16 last night on Checkpoint, we heard from Indian students about to be deported saying they had absolutely no idea their immigration advisors were behaving fraudulently. Tonight we heard from Michael Woodhouse saying the buck stops with the students. Kia ora, John, says Renee. Maybe Bill English should ask Michael Woodhouse to talk to Donald Trump instead. They seem to be on the same wavelength. As regards the Indian students, these students have been let down by their agents, the college they enrolled in here, and now the government of New Zealand. Lots of feedback along those lines. Speaking of Donald Trump, he's sowing diplomatic chaos around the world just 2 weeks into his presidency as he feuds with world leaders and signals an unpredictable foreign diplomacy style. Foreign diplomats and State Department officials have expressed shock at reports that the president has lashed out in phone calls at the leaders of Australia and Mexico. At the same time, he's pleased Republicans, Israeli officials and some powerful Arab leaders by pressing a tough line on Iran. The BBC's John Sopel reports.
The trappings of office are impressive. The reality is burdensome. Last night, President Trump and daughter Ivanka left the White House to fly to an airbase where the remains of a US Navy SEAL were being returned, killed after a military operation in Yemen, the first one ordered by America's new commander-in-chief. At a prayer breakfast this morning in Washington, that experience seemed to weigh heavy.
Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. We will never forget the men and women who wear the uniform. Believe me.
But overwhelmingly, the tone on foreign policy is abrasive.
When you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. They're tough. We have to be tough. It's time we're going to be a little tough, folks. We're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually. It's not going to happen anymore.
In the past day or so, we've seen a warning shot fired at Iran.
We are officially putting Iran on notice. Thank you.
Details have emerged of what was apparently a shouting match between him and Australia's Prime Minister. This was over an Obama-era agreement that the US would accept mainly Muslim refugees that Australia wouldn't take. And with Mexico, a warning he'd send troops across the border if the authorities there didn't deal with the bad hombres, as he called them. The person who'll be in charge of US foreign policy from now on, Rex Tillerson, took up his post today. What was striking was how much more conciliatory he was.
No one will tolerate disrespect of anyone. Before we are employees of the State Department, we are human beings first. Let us extend respect to each other, especially when we may disagree.
It's too soon to say what a Donald Trump foreign policy will look like. Yes, we've heard what he's said, but we're yet to see what he'll do. What we do know is that he will continue to take aim at anything or anyone who gets in his way. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, his successor on The Apprentice.
And I want to just pray for Arnold, if we can, for those ratings, okay?
And it brought a fairly swift response from the former governor and Terminator.
Hey, Donald, I have a great idea. Why don't we switch jobs? You take over TV, because you're such an expert in ratings, and I take over your job. And then people can finally sleep comfortably again.
Just gets more and more bizarre, doesn't it? However, in a town called Victoria in Texas, something quite different was happening. It started with a fire in the local mosque, hate crime, accident. No one knows yet, but the fire happened just hours after Donald Trump issued his executive order. What happened next was striking. Over 20,000 people, the vast majority saying they're not Muslim, have so far made donations to help rebuild the mosque. And then the local Jewish community said, until you get your mosque rebuilt, please use our synagogue. And that small neighbourly gesture has assumed a larger meaning in the current climate being reported globally. Robert Loeb is the president of Victoria's Temple B'nai Israel.
A member of our Jewish community, Dr. Gary Branfman, who was friends of Dr. Hashmi, who was the president of the mosque, when he got news on Saturday morning that the mosque had burned down, he immediately reached out to me, since I'm president of Temple B'nai Israel, and said, hey, can we offer our congregation to the Muslim community? And I said, absolutely. We would love to have them use our temple as often and as long as they need to. And Gary actually handled all that with Dr. Hashmi. I was actually out of town when all this happened, but I mean, I got the text and the email, and we had a conversation Saturday morning. So Gary Branfman was actually the one that was on point.
And so this is happening already? Have people from the Muslim congregation in Victoria, Texas started coming to your synagogue?
You know, John, honestly, I don't think they have yet, and I don't know if they're going to. I mean, basically, you know, we've made this offer to them, and our temple's available to them. I think they've got an education building somewhere that they might be using. And honestly, some of these Muslim members have very nice houses too. So the answer is, I don't know if they've used the temple or not yet, but it's available to them.
And that is also speaking to something bigger, isn't it? That I suspect probably the world needs at the moment, and that is a reminder that there is something fundamental that binds us all, and it's not all about tribes and striking poses and enmities and not getting along. In fact, you in Victoria, Texas, get along famously with each other.
We really do, you know, and Bridget asked me about this earlier. We're a town of about 70,000 people, so everybody knows everybody. I mean, when you get into bigger towns, people kind of get clicking up a little bit, and so we know several members of the Muslim community, and so they're our friends and neighbors. So when this happened, it was just natural, and I think as Jews we've had some special empathy probably for people that we would step up. But let me say this: a lot of people have stepped up. You know, lots of churches in Victoria have also offered their place. I think we were the first, and I think that maybe that kind of got some publicity. But as I understand it, on Sunday they had a ceremony or a worship at the site of where the mosque burned down. It's my understanding, and again, I was out of town, I've heard anywhere from 400 to 700 people came to that, which is an enormous outreach showing of people driving in from Houston and Austin and San Antonio, and a lot of people in Victoria. Basically, all to kind of gather to lean on each other. So, you know, people are talking about us, but I mean, there are a lot of communities that are standing together on this.
I don't want to put you in an embarrassing position at all, because that's not consistent with the spirit of this conversation. But you are in Republican territory, right? Where you are, people overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And is a larger point being made? Is this a bit of a whistleblowing exercise? Is this a message to Washington, hey, calm down there? Or is this just simply about friends and neighbours?
You know, I think that certainly the political environment in this country is heightened right now. And yes, I am in a Republican country. But I think a lot of people, with change of administration, and certainly the new administration is being very active, I think everybody needs to do what they can to make the world better. And in times like this, I think that's probably more important. So, you know, I think if this happened a year ago, we would have stood up as well as we stood up now. But I mean, I think that it kind of stands out a little bit more now. You know, we're all hoping that this was, you know, an electrical fire, or they left a candle burning or something. I mean, nobody wants this to be an act of vengeance or a hate crime. So we're all hopeful that that's not that. It's just a matter that other people lost their place of worship. And so, you know, I think we would have done this a year ago or 2 years ago. I just think people need to stand together to make the world a better place. So I think it's more just the way people feel.
Robert Loeb from Victoria, Texas, talking to us earlier. Back to Conan Young now in Christchurch. He's at Peter Randrup's kitchen. Peter's company, Anteater Supplies, gives the world edible insects. They supply them to restaurants around New Zealand and overseas. We met Peter and Conan before, seeing those insects being fried up. Let's go back.
So we've got some grass-fed native New Zealand locusts. A lot of people don't believe we have, or don't realise we have native New Zealand locusts. These are from New Zealand, farmed in New Zealand in the South Island. What I'm going to do, they're quite similar to prawns in how you can cook them. So they've got quite a sort of creamy looking colour when they're uncooked. What I'm going to do is put this skewer here in a bit of oil, just really simple. It'll bubble away there for about 45 seconds maybe. And it'll start turning quite red, just like a prawn does. And you can give it a bit of a shake around if you like. If you want it to look really cool, sometimes you can get the wings to splay out. It looks quite cool. And I'll throw a bit of seasoning on afterwards, anything you like, maybe a bit of garlic salt, chilli salt, whatever takes your fancy.
And they really are quite magnificent looking bugs, aren't they? They started off like a dull sort of pink colour, and they're really sort of starting to brighten up now that they've been in the fry pan for a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. And you can sort of see the comparison of prawns. They're actually from the same family as prawns, so they're quite closely related. So biologically that makes perfect sense that they would sort of turn red.
And so what sort of flavour can we expect here?
So these locusts have quite a mild flavour, which I think is a result of what they're fed. Because they're grass-fed, they've got a really sort of natural, fresh flavour, quite buttery. They're about 25% protein, 10% fat, with a sort of really nice fatty acid profile. So quite a common description would be sort of a freshwater prawn flavour, with sort of a pork crackling type crunch, slightly lighter than pork crackling. Quite a satisfying sort of crunch. You should be able to hear it on radio, hopefully.
Right, great. Well, you've got my mouth is starting to water, believe it or not, for native New Zealand locusts. So should we have a try of these?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So what would you? You've got some seasoning there. What are we going to season these with?
So this is some chili salt, Manuka smoked chili salt, courtesy of Hammerhead Foods. And what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of seasoning on there, just enough to get a bit of flavour. One of the beauties of these locusts is that they are incredibly versatile, a lot like chicken. Their natural flavour isn't super strong, so you can do a whole bunch of things with it.
Wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. The things we do for good radio. Right, so these look fantastic. And still a little bit nervous about eating these bugs, but I'm glad to see you're going to be joining me as well.
Yeah,
So.
well, it'd be rude not to. Is this your first bug?
For quite a long time. The last time I think I tried, it might have been a cricket in Asia somewhere when I'd had a few beers, so first time sober.
Okay, good on you. They do go well with the beer. Quite often people will have one and be like, oh, I'll tell you what, I could go with the beer right now. They can imagine it in a bar. I can't wait till the stage where we can start serving entire bowls of locusts in a bar, just like a side, pay $8, that kind of thing. Got to get this sort of scale there and the price down first, but I think that's where the future of sort of these locusts will be here in New Zealand. Bit of an art to eating it, so not really an art, but a lot of people will sort of try and eat it differently. Just eat it like you would any other bit of food. So chew it properly, swallow it down, easy as. Right. Savour the taste.
Okay. Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
Well, I ate both of mine at the same time. Anyway.
I like to enjoy them sort of one at a time, but
yeah, they are really nice. I guess I can definitely taste obviously the chili salt, but the texture is great. It's almost like not like a chicken wing, because it's not quite as much meat on there, but that's really good. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you are. That's quite a common response. People are scared at first. Once they've had one, almost everyone will say, "Oh, can I have two? Can I have another?" Which I think is the best thing from a business point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm glad you also fit in that category, Conan.
They are definitely quite Moorish, and I think I could definitely have more of those.
Yeah.
Conan, who is not just being polite, we really think he did like them, with Peter Randrup eating locusts. Conan also enjoyed some ants, which he described as tasting like lemongrass with a blue cheese aftertaste. Go, Conan. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate your company. Have a wonderful Waitangi weekend if you're lucky enough to be getting all 3 days off. We are, and we will be back on Tuesday. We hope to see you at 5 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6:30. I'm Paul Brennan. The British drug company Reckitt Benckiser has been fined a record $1.08 million in the Auckland District Court for making misleading claims about its Nurofen painkiller products. Northland farmers say the government's drought declaration for the region comes as a relief, with no significant rain in the north since late October. The Prime Minister says the option of moving the National Waitangi Day celebrations around the country is worth investigating. Bill English will be in Auckland as a guest of Ngāti Whātua for Waitangi Day. Meanwhile, holiday weekend snarl-ups north of Wellington have been causing